We know this one. It still gets us. What makes this scary is that it forces us to focus our eyesight on it, and limits us seeing the way out, which makes this sense of claustrophobia, because it limits one of our 5 primary senses. Not only that, but when we get into the bathrooms here, there is another one that I've found distracted us a lot into a brief worry and refocus on the moment that the initial closes distance. And then we hear this. Which, I don't know about you, but I hate hearing stuff running at me from behind. And this got me so bad that I had to look at a photo of my cat before continuing on. It's a short introduction to an enemy type with rules we've seen before, though in the next brief section, we go liminal, and the numbers crank up. This level design gives us short moments to break line of sight with them to move, but also makes us feel horribly uncomfier for what's past the fog. Though really what we have to do here is go to the ladder. This kind of level design comes back later again, but with a more tight-knit area, with Mita dolls around nearly every corner. It got me so good I needed to take a break because my heart was about to explode. See, what makes these segments wonderful for horror is that it takes rules we already know and a modern concept of liminal horror together for some brief, genuinely terrifying sequences. There are a few more liminal space usages like this where you can find long-legged Mita. Do you see what I mean? It's like dream architecture. In fact, I didn't even discover long-legged Mita by myself. I found her by watching someone else. What keeps the scares and atmosphere going strong, though, are the breaks you get in between during the story. Take Cappie and Mila's segments as a break from the horror. The Just Dance-like thing with Cappie in particular did a really good job of refreshing the initial few scares of the first few levels. And really, you could stay here until you exhaust all the interactables. By the time you leave, you should be refreshed, as intended for the scares to keep hitting right, especially if you're doing the game in one go like I did. Mila personally was my favorite break though. She seems like a really cool introverted geek. Which made my experience here heartbreaking. And that we got a Chekhov's gun for this part in the saw. In the opening sequence, we find this thing in the oven where we were explicitly told not to look, and since then it wasn't used until now, which if you don't know Chekhov's gun is the idea in writing that if there's a rifle in the wall in the opening, it must be used in the story. Another thing I appreciate about this is that it's branded as Pochita, and I can always appreciate a reference to that anime. In the event we fail the chase though, we meet the guide bar and Mita's deranged smile. Side note, personally I find this silly. Pushing the cheekbones up until they clip her eyes and show off fangs and gums doesn't work right for me. Speaking of creepy smiles, don't you think she's beautiful? We've heard of ugly Mita earlier in the game a few times, with warnings of how violent she is. See, what makes her scary isn't just the pretense we have, but what we see when we get to her. She has this what I like to call an uncanny valley effect for art styles. Her gray skin makes her look like a corpse. Those eyes on the anime-esque look just scream incorrect. The human teeth is a big no-no for aesthetics and they're so out of place. Her extending neck feels like a Junji Ito monster. And then the scurrying on all fours feels animalistic even if we only see it like once. So for what Mita is asking, conventionally no, she isn't beautiful. But from a horror design view, she's wonderfully horrible and a masterpiece of monster design. On the other side of horror designing here, we have a face with a more psychological effect on us, being young Mita and the loop. This is earlier in the game, and I feel like the purpose here was a psychological horror, where her disfiguration and tone of voice is unnerving initially, but truthfully, this whole level is her life, as far as we know, and that she's just a little girl. This unending hall, I feel, had PT inspiration, which also, when I first played, thought was going the way of Exit 8, so for the first few loops, memorizing the design, only to realize no. The point of this segment is to listen to young Mita and talk with her, as eventually she gives a hint for us to leave. Young Mita hits an emotional horror for us, whereas humans it's natural for us to feel bad for seeing a young one hurt, and that we can't help her after we leave. No wonder why I've seen handfuls of people really wishing we could have brought her with us when we jump out the window. Or could have her in a peaceful mode. Forewarning, this section's gonna get a little existential. I suggest don't think about it too hard. This later level here, Chapter 17, the real world, where we spend 1,000 days doing the same thing over and over again. This is where I believe Miside performs psychological horror the best. Mita has a point, like she said in the previous scene, in that the monotony and repetitiveness sucks, which is a very personal scare to some of us, and what it can genuinely be like. Now, personally, I love where I am. No, really, I do. I'm making my variety show here to keep things different every Thursday. While during the weekdays, I'm an accountant. See, what I really admire is that this goes after what life can be. For 1,000 days of the same thing, the game knows that this horror sticks with us after we wrap up, as there's no mini games from here on out until the finale, where we discover that despite our best efforts, almost 20 chapters of our journey later, we're granted a brief glimpse of what it was like beforehand, with a clever lag effect that genuinely made me think my laptop was melting, until we're shown Mita collect us in a cartridge that so many others preceding us met the same fate. Miside used weeping angels and shook them up with liminal spaces, a more modern concept. Ensured we had breathers to refresh us so the horror lands right on the mark without going stale and the atmosphere not fizzling out. Had a beautifully ugly monster design in Ugly Mita, tugged at our heartstrings with the loop and young Mita there. Made us ponder about our day-to-day life in Chapter 17. This is why I believe Miside did a really good job at horror, and why I liked it so much. Which, for a game that snuck in right at the end of 2024, I wasn't expecting such a banger. And if you don't agree, that's okay. Or if you have your own part you liked, then please comment. I really want to hear your experiences with this game. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all liked watching this as I loved making this. So be sure to like this video so I know I did it right. Subscribe too so I know you'll be back around sometime. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye everyone.